Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the singing of our national anthem.
Let's get Brexit done.
My administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country.
Welcome back to Mid-Atlantic, where America's immigration enforcement is starting to look less like policy and more like a roaming theatre troupe of masked men with pepper spray, body cams, and of course, trigger fingers. This week, Minneapolis is in the headline. The fatal shooting of an American civilian during an ICE operation has detonated a political firestorm that the Trump administration clearly did not plan for. But you'd think that a heads up just last week. What officials rushed to frame as a justified use of force has instead become a national argument about accountability, militarized enforcement, and what happens when federal power collides with a city that refuses to stay quiet. The governor is openly challenging Washington, and even normally reliable Republican voices are starting to look uncomfortable. Now, joining me today is Steve O'Neill in London, Leah Brown in Broadstairs, Mike Donahue in Los Angeles. We have Corey Bernard in Manchester and Logan Phillips in Washington, D.C. And then item 2, because British politics never misses an opportunity for self-inflicted damage, Andy Burnham, saviour of Manchester. We look at the Gorton and Denton seat. Should he run? Why didn't he run? Will he even get the chance, maybe, to eventually stand? He wanted in, Labour's machine said no, and what should have been a routine moment has turned into a live test of Keir Starmer's authority. Logan, it's not many things which truly shock me in the world of politics and current affairs, but I can honestly say when I watched that video, when I watched that execution, I was genuinely shocked in a way that I wasn't quite with the shooting last week in the car, maybe because you couldn't see her. There was a level of detachment, but this felt incredibly personal, and what it was, a murder. And I could see how I could have got caught up, or a friend of mine could have got caught up in that. He was somebody who was just trying to defend someone who'd been assaulted by ICE, pushed over into the snow, and they were murdered for no reason. Did we need something as blatantly... the word isn't blatant, and I'm so trying to find the right words here. Did we need something as shocking as that for Republican voices, some Republican voices, to now call for an investigation?
That's hard to say, Royfield, because there was a steady tide building before this. But I think that this moment was uniquely powerful. And I think the American people, by and large, feel the exact same way you did. Look, the way a lot of us heard about this first was when the administration lied to the American people. They said that this man was a terrorist that came with a gun that was trying to kill Border Patrol agents, and it gives you a little pause, gun at the protest. And then you watch it, and the whole thing was completely different. They escalated. They started spraying over and over and over again a woman in the face with pepper spray, as they keep doing to protesters for no reason, because they feel the need to dominate every scene. And that's when Alex Preddy, a Veterans Affairs nurse whose job it is to help people, stands up to try to lift her up, and they kill him. They throw him to the ground, they beat him up, and they shoot him dead. And then they try to dishonor his memory. And so I think as tens of millions of Americans have watched this, it has shocked the conscience. And you are seeing people who are not political get off the couch and get involved. That's when things change often, right? It's those moments that shock a nation's conscience. I've seen hundreds of people in my own feed who have never seen talk about politics, who are Republicans, who are conservative, or libertarian, that say that this is enough. And Republicans are hearing it now. And frankly, even before this, it was happening. In Minneapolis, on Friday, the day before the shooting, 50,000 people took to the streets to peacefully protest over the abuses happening to that city. And by the way, this is not 50,000 in Atlanta or Phoenix where it's reasonably warm, not now, but normally. This is in negative 20 degree Fahrenheit. That's negative 29 degrees Celsius. The coldest, believe it was literally the coldest place on Earth that day. And 50,000 people showed up to protest. One-fifth of people went on strike. So the American people have been roused, and the pushback is strong, and hopefully can lead to changing things. We'll have to see.
Oh, very powerfully and beautifully said. Mike, why does the administration continue to escalate things rhetorically instead of de-escalating?
Well, because they can. This is how the people at the top actually feel. Like, and it's the dog wagging the tail, right? So Trump and Noam and Miller, this is the way that they feel. Bovino, this is who they are at their core. And so they're acting in their normal selves. The issue is that they're pulling along half of America with them, or 40% of America, or whatever number you want to assign. But they're inherently cruel people, and they have the power to exercise it. It happens in history all the time, right? We're just repeating it.
Logan, are we seeing a genuine bipartisan moment here?
I certainly wouldn't say that. And the reason I wouldn't say that is because politicians, unfortunately, there are certainly exceptions, but politicians by and large like power. And the primaries have not happened for these Republican members of Congress in the Senate. And so their conscience is probably partially shocked. But to be a member of the Republican Party by now, you're usually stifling your opinion constantly. And so it's very easy to do if you do that repeatedly. And the ones still here have done that all the time. So they'll probably make their voice heard a lot more as it gets close to the general election. Now, you can tell in these interviews how unhappy they are with having watched that shooting. They're just saying it with the kid gloves. They're calling for an investigation. Some of these senators who tend to be much more responsible than their partners in the House are pushing for more serious reform, a handful of them. I think this is going to come from the American people, though, and it always comes from the American people when we change big things. It usually doesn't come from the leaders, right? And if we continue to see a strong enough pushback, that's when politicians are forced to change their calculus if they want to hold on to power. And I will say at least this conversation is far broader than anything that I've seen before. We are in the early days. I think it certainly helped that we had one of the biggest snowstorms in recent memory in American history, where everyone was stuck inside just watching video after video. That was a horror show and really stains the conscience.
Are we at an inflection point whereby one of the key planks of the Trump administration using ICE as stormtroopers in American cities could well be over?
I would say first that no podcast is good without a little conflict and disagreement. And whereas Logan is deservedly taking the optimist role, I will be his foil and take the pessimist role vis-a-vis this question. My worldview has changed actually quite a bit over the last week or so. And dare I say, I'm even more pessimistic than I used to be. But Logan's messaging, when I hear Logan's messaging, as well-intentioned and as accurate and as reasonable as it is, it's the right thing to do and say. That whole get out, talk to people, call your representative, get out on the streets, protest, make your voices heard. That has become the thoughts and prayers of the left. So when a lot of people get shot on the right, they say, we're sending thoughts and prayers. And when people on the left get shot, we say, well, we're going to make our voices heard. We're going to go out in the streets. We're going to call our congresspeople. Nothing happened as a result of the BLM marches, which were in the millions a few years ago. Nothing happened because of the women's marches in the millions that happened a couple of years ago. The women's rights movement is arguably in a much worse place today than it was 4 or 5 years ago. And two things really have shifted me on this. Number one, Logan says when we saw that video, we recoiled at it. We're like, what the hell is going on? And even more so, you can say for the pretty video. And I know I'm rambling here, but you can find a very large percentage of the population, those wearing red and white hats, that say she deserved it. She was trying to kill the officer. They'll say that he deserved it. He took a gun to a protest. He was brandishing a weapon, or whatever party line they're trying to sell now. And it doesn't matter that you have the video. You have two clear-cut videos of murders, right? That at the very least, non-justified use of violence. And you have half of this voting population continuing to say, I don't see a murder there. I see justified use of force. I see someone who shouldn't have been protesting with a gun in their holster in their back, regardless of what the Constitution says. You know, the New York Times last week published, and I suggest you all read it, a roundtable of 11 Trump supporters. And to this day, they support him. And they asked him to give him grades on a scale of A to F. And the lowest one of the 11 gave him a C. Everyone else had given Trump's first year either an A or a B. And that covers everything: economy, immigration, Venezuela, taking over Greenland, ICE running rampant. And I'm more depressed than I ever have been. I am more pessimistic than I ever have been. And I think the only thing, and please feel free to edit this down. And this is a very personal decision. You know, there's no expectation of this for anywhere else. I'm not suggesting that. But I made the decision not to have any future contact with anybody in my circle who supports Trump to this day. And the reason I'm doing that, it's the end result of frustration, whether they're in my family, whether they're longtime friends, whatever they are, and both of those conditions exist. But those people aren't feeling the impact of Trump's decisions. Like, they're happy somebody gets shot in Minnesota, some kooky liberal gets shot. What? Fine, whatever. It doesn't bother them. Nothing bothered these people. This goes back to the lack of empathy. Nothing bothered these people unless something happens to them. And I have to finally, if my brother or a close friend was torturing animals or participating in dogfights, I would not associate with him. So I think it's going to be hard. I'm hoping that I can stick to it, but I'm cutting off. They have to realize that there's some ramification, there's some real world consequences for supporting this level of cruelty. And I hope I can stick through it, but they can't keep going through unaffected, unscathed, unimpacted by the absolute craziness and nation destruction that's going on right now. So we'll find out next time whether or not whether my willpower is held up or not.
Mike, just before Corey jumps in, it's a very honest revelation to share with us. How do you signal that? How do you signal to your family what you're doing?
Yeah, so my brother is a big MAGA guy. He won't admit that, but he is. So I was just talking to my mother over the weekend, as all good sons should do. And I said, if Mark reaches out because I'm not responding to him, this is why, right? If he asks you, hey, Mike isn't responding to my texts, this is why. I think it's just, I don't respond and just see what happens. And if someone reaches out to me, I'm just going to be like, hey, here's the deal. Here's what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And I hope you understand why I'm doing it. And if you don't, that's okay. But I'm waiting. I'm being a little bit coward, like for my family and stuff, I'm notifying third parties, the intermediaries. But I think for the others, I'll notify either intermediaries or I'll wait for them to ask and reach out.
Yeah, so just listening to what you were saying there, Mike, made me think, especially when you were talking about the cruelty. That's what stuck out the most. And then, it made me sort of think that there's a difference to, at least to me, it seems like there's one of the major differences this time round is that the rhetoric was always there. The action was always there as well to follow the rhetoric, right? But the volume and the intensity and the pace seems markedly different this time. That's what seems to be the difference to me this time. It's more of a question. Well, do you agree? And if you do, why is that? The rhetoric's the same. The action to an extent is the same, but it's the intensity that seems to be ramped up massively. To Logan as well.
I think Logan might have some good answers to this too, but I think for me, it's back to the Trump equals Putin sort of correlation, where Putin will push, and does he get pushback? No. Okay, I'll push further. I'll push further. I'll push further. And I think Trump is very much like that in terms of incrementalism. And can I get away with this? If I can, great. I'm going to go on to the next big thing. And so far on any of these real big issues, right, from committing war crimes to deporting 2-year-olds, there's not, he isn't getting any tangible, it's not hurting him at all for these actions. And I think that brazen action doesn't tame itself. And I'll say the other reason that it's accelerating is because the Supreme Court and their own internal version of interpretation of the law supports their action. So like the big thing you're going to hear about is the immunity, right? Do they have immunity for shooting these people? And the Supreme Court has ruled, even before this recent court, that federal agents, if they cannot be sued for violating the Constitution. So for violating your First Amendment rights, for violating your Fourth Amendment rights. And now they're taking that. So not only did the Supreme Court say it's okay to check papers on brown people just because they're brown, which was shocking in itself, but now ICE is saying that they can now go into people's houses without a warrant, which is clear Fourth Amendment violations. And that's what they have been doing in Minneapolis. They are going door to door, and in some cases, they're just breaking down the doors and going in, sans warrant, with the understanding their leadership knows, well, they're not going to be sued for it. We can't be sued for this. There's no repercussions to just breaking in and going and grabbing people. So as long as that stating exists, you're going to see more and more acceleration, more and more violations, because there's no pushback. There's just not.
Hey, so Mike, I want to respond to a lot of the things you said. And just first, I hear you, man. It's been a heartbreaking moment for Americans that care and that find this to be unjust. There's a lot that is special about America, and we were in our feelings during the Obama administration because it felt like the best in us was ascendant. And the country we thought we had has not been the country we have become of late. And I get why it breaks you, because it breaks me too. But I just don't agree with the premise for a few reasons, right? First, yeah, you're right. They're not perfect tools. People that disagree with us also have tools and effectively use them to push things in the other direction as well. But let's just start with the Black Lives Matters protest, for example, right? One of the largest protests in American history. I don't agree that it didn't do anything. Let's look at Minneapolis first specifically, right? A place that had some of the highest levels of police shootings in the country, highlighted by the horrible, even though it wasn't a shooting, death of George Floyd. Did you know there wasn't a single one last year? They collected thousands of guns, not a single one. They made massive reforms. In fact, all across the country, there were over 140 bills that were passed after Floyd's murder that led to more police oversight. And we've seen in the states that have done them, which have been blue and purple states, real reductions in abuse of force by police officers. We've seen bans on chokeholds. We've seen body cameras be used by most police departments across the country. I think those things mattered. We also saw the largest turnout in American history, which ended Donald Trump's first term. Now, I understand that he came back and won, but people didn't turn out. It was their lack of engagement that enabled that possibility in the third closest election since the 1960s. So I think these tools matter. There's no perfect solutions. I understand that, but we got to use the tools that we can. And I will say the people of Minnesota have done a lot here. They have raised the attention of a nation that, frankly, sadly would have moved on as those immigrants in Minnesota were abused. Right? We're focusing on the killings and the treatments of protesters, but this started with people with green cards getting taken into these detention centers with no justification, citizens, people being profiled because they're Latino or they're Somali, all across the country, but in extreme levels in Minneapolis. And the reason the nation paid attention is because people were taking great risk to film these agents as they abused people's rights and they blew whistles to bring attention to them. It was everyday Americans that demanded that this stopped that have finally pushed back against ICE, right? And now the nation at large has changed their view. The idea of deporting ICE was about as unpopular as anything, -20 support for that. Now it's +5. And I don't necessarily think it's going to be abolished, but I think in the next administration, they will be radically different. They will be shrunk to a tiny size of what they are now. They will be required to use warrants. It will change the trajectory of this country. And I think you're going to see Democrats, if they win the House, which I suspect they will, and if they win the Senate, which they have a fighting shot at, demand huge changes in the meantime too. So I think this stuff matters. And yes, success isn't guaranteed, but it's the tool that we have, and we have to go all in and trying to use it to change things.
Right. And I completely agree with you, and I really appreciate your optimistic perspective. And you're right. When a ballot is put in front of people, then they do take action, right, based on the other things. But from now until then, right, our sphere of true actions is extremely limited. And I'm going to go research the effect of the BLM projects and things. But like, as you mentioned, those all happen in blue states or purple states, right? We're talking about national protection of people. And I think I'd be hard pressed to see or to have a woman say that the rights of a woman living in Texas or Alabama or Mississippi is better than it was prior to the women's right marches, right? But I understand your point, but I don't want to wait till November to start impacting change. And I think again, I'm sorry, the politicians are for the most part corrupt. They're too highly influenced by moneyed individuals or moneyed organizations, whether that's DNC or RNC. The fact that it took, Keith Ellison and Chuck Schumer for two people to be murdered in cold blood to actually finally start talking about some actual real legislative action, which may or may not work. We just saw 7 Democrats just the other day agree to continue funding ICE, right? So I have reached this point of exclusion because I cannot go shoot a nice person, not only because it'd be wrong, but because they're just a tool, right? There's some guy with kids and a wife, and he thinks he's doing the right thing, so it's not right to commit violence against him. But I have to do something, and that's the interpersonal. Trying to cause some sort of interpersonal discomfort is the only resolve I've come to, and I'm optimistic. I hope, like you're right, that something changes with the elections, but I'm not willing to wait that long, and it's still a toss-up kind of question as to whether or not even the midterms will have that kind of impact. So
it's not that I'm as optimistic. It's not that I think everything is going to work out. It's that I've seen people go through worse, including American history, fighting the evils of Jim Crow, which I think was the most important victory in this nation's history, facing down dogs, facing down hoses from police officers, beating people within an inch of their lives, and then sometimes killing them because they wanted to have the same right to vote, because they wanted to be able to sit at the counter without getting thrown out of a place, because they didn't want to be lynched. And
so I'll ask you,
but my point though, Mike, I just want to get
right.
what I'm saying here. It's okay. It took them 100 years and they kept fighting. And we don't have 100 years here. But if they didn't give up after everything they went through to get the most important victory, I think, in American history, we have to fight too. We have to fight too, not because success is guaranteed, but because it can work. And this is the tools we have. And I'm open to new tools if you have other ideas. But to me, I see an American people that care, that are getting off the couch, that are getting motivated, that are disgusted at what they see, and are going to demand more from their government. They don't appreciate it being lied to. They don't appreciate seeing their citizens being killed for using their voices. And I'm right there with them. And this is what we have to do. Um, and it doesn't mean everything's going to work out, but I know that we're going to do our part.
Right. And I totally agree with you that I'm seeing a much higher percentage of engagement in what we used to call the moderates, right? Or the
Yes.
undecideds. There's a lot higher level of engagement. Not all of it is, anti-Trump, but we're seeing a lot more interpersonal engagement amongst that. I don't know what you would label them, a non-political voter, right? Or someone who doesn't really care that much about non-engaged voter, non-informed voter.
Someone who doesn't
But
understand that politics matters, they don't think about politics as a way to achieve the things they care
right.
about.
They're starting to get it, right? Because partly because it's on the news every night. But I will remind you, all that civil rights stuff, none of that really had any impact until Johnson signed the executive order enforcing the Civil Rights Act, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But then
So
then
it's executive.
it took a lot of work to get there.
Yeah, but ultimately, if your executive isn't on board, it's not going to happen, right?
Sometimes it's about stopping stuff from happening too, though. And that's the defensive role, right? Uh, and it has worked before. Trump wanted to get rid of the ACA, he did not. And the mass protests are the reason why it happened. He's sending someone who is I look, this guy took a bribe, he's not a hero, but the head of ICE who's been completely sidelined by Kristi Noem and Greg Bovino. I don't know how much we want to get into the nuances of the politics, but he's now getting sent to be in charge of what's happening in Minneapolis because Trump can tell this is becoming thermonuclearly negative for him. And that might lead to some changes too. So I think that, they're losing normal Republicans. I'm not saying most Republicans, but that's when Trump freaks out. He doesn't care about winning the average swing voter anymore. He cares about keeping at least 90% of Republicans on board with him. And when that starts to slip, that's when he always makes adjustments.
So maybe but I haven't seen that slip. I think it's dropped to like 85% of registered Republicans still support Trump or something like that.
Oh,
It's
I think
it's
he's worried that it's going to slip. I'm not saying it slipped yet, but they don't like what they're seeing with ICE.
Time will tell.
Gentlemen, can I just applaud you both for a very honest conversation there. It was great hearing you both speak. And I must admit, I always kind of veer on the side of angels, or at least our better selves. And, the arc of history bends towards justice, blah, blah, blah. So emotionally, symbolically, and actually, I side with you, Logan. But Mike, I totally feel your pain and your cynicism. What we saw was so shocking, so obviously that what the administration said happened did not happen. This man was brandishing his phone and was actually being a good citizen. This is an American to be lauded, who was trying to protect somebody who he didn't actually know, but somebody who was actually assaulted by law enforcement, and he paid for that with his life. He was executed in front of the world. And if that doesn't make every right standing American not only stop and pause, but get up and say something is broken, something is wrong, nothing will at all. And on that point, on that somber point, and that great exchange from two Americans, we should travel over to the other side of the pond.
Hey, Royfield, real quickly, can I add one extra thing here?
Yeah, go.
This is partly for the non-Americans watching. I know America has been deeply disappointing and antagonizing over the last year. The way we've treated our allies and watching what ICE is doing, you're probably wondering what the hell is wrong with us. You can judge us for that, fair enough. But I'd also ask you to judge us from the actions of everyday Minnesotans. The 50,000 people that came out in the cold and negative 20 degrees, the people that have dropped everything to take care of their neighbors who are immigrants, to give them food packages, to document wrongs against them on camera, to the hundreds of Minnesotans that were packed into churches this weekend, creating care packages with their own money to send out to families that have been ripped apart by ICE, to the Minnesotans creating logs of evidence that will likely be used for the future prosecution for some of these agents, to the people walking kids to school that are, because their parents can't do it anymore, even if they're legal immigrants, they're just feels it too at risk. It's part of the American spirit too. And there's still a lot of things in this country that are beautiful and worth fighting for.
You know, Logan, I really feel that you've brought your A game to the show today, and you always are the member of the panel who believes in American ideals and believes that America can live up to those ideals. And I think in the attention-soaked economy that we live in, shootings are state murders, executions, rape and pillage are what brings us to, gives us a start, makes us notice that something is up, and we all get angry for a moment. But what you've reminded us of is all the things that happen in the background. I did not know that there had been significant moves around policing in blue and purple states. I did not know that. Right? That goes on, it goes unreported, but it's not undocumented. It doesn't make the attention media. It doesn't make TikTok. It doesn't make Facebook. It doesn't make Instagram. It doesn't make Twitter, those things. You know, you have to have your eyes close to the media source to read that stuff, to know that stuff. So thank you for that. Then also the decent goodness of people and the moral outrage which Minnesotans, Minneapolis, people in the city of Minneapolis, are not only feeling, but actually are doing. And I was aware that many Minneapolis are deciding to take brown children to school to give them extra protection. I was aware of that. But I wasn't aware of some of the other things that you said. And this stuff goes unreported, though it's not quite undocumented, and it doesn't make our attention-soaked media. And we've always got to remember that for every ICE execution, there are many ramifications. And in many, or some of those ramifications are going to be that, yes, some communities are scared, but actually they've also been shown a lot of love, an old-fashioned word, by other members in their community who don't happen to share their ethnicity, don't happen to share their religion necessarily, but care for them as human beings and care for them because they don't want to see their neighbors vulnerable. They don't want to see their neighbors taken off at the dead of night, and they are reviled by seeing and hearing that 5-year-old children are being taken into detention. So thank you for reminding us of the moral goodness of many Americans, because we can forget it in moments like this.
You can edit this, but I have one short last point for the Brits. This is
you're not letting me leave this, are you? You're not letting me leave.
No, you can stay up. You're a pub owner. For the Brits, I have long warned you guys that your society is even more susceptible than ours, theoretically, to these violations. And I am going to end with a quote from Jack Smith, and I would recommend watching the Jack Smith highlights or lowlights on YouTube. But he said, "I have seen how the rule of law can erode. My fear is that we have seen the rule of law function in this country for so long that many of us have come to take it for granted. But the rule of law is not self-executing. It depends on our collective commitment to apply it. It requires dedicated service on behalf of others, especially when that service is difficult and comes with costs. Our willingness to pay those costs is what tests and defines our commitment to the rule of law and to this wonderful country." And I'll end with that.
It was only 20 months ago that Andy Burnham was elected for a third time as the Mayor of Greater Manchester. His campaigning on behalf of the region helped him become Labour's most popular politician, earning him the nickname the King of the North. But it is in the North and in that job where he will be staying after Labour's ruling committee denied his request to run as an MP. In a series of posts on social media, he said he was disappointed by today's NEC decision and concerned about its potential impact on the important elections ahead. He then added, "PS, the fact the media was informed of the NEC decision before I was tells you everything you need to know about the way the Labour Party is being run these days."
Steve O'Neill, we're talking about British politics. All of a sudden, it seems British politics has got exciting, or at least we have something to report on anyway. Does the blocking of Burnham read like discipline, or is this fear of a rival returning to Westminster?
I'm going to go for discipline. And when you think about what Burnham was asking, he was saying, let's have a big by-election in Manchester, 2 years out from when I'm due to run again, just so I can come back to Parliament. I'm set up, destabilise things. It's not that convincing. You're trying to think of the rights and wrongs of it, that he has a right to stand in that seat. So I'm going to opt, perhaps unpopularly, for discipline.
Goodness. Surely Prime Minister's won a cabinet of all the talents. And one thing that Burnham has shown is that he is a popular Labour politician. And those are as rare as hen's teeth. Leah Brown, this isn't discipline, is it? Starmer is running scared.
I think I have to agree with you. And I think the evidence for that is the way that the NEC voted and the fact that Shabana Mahmood chose to withhold her vote as chair is a further indication of the way in which power was wielded in relation to this particular vote. It's an interesting situation when a leader is so afraid of losing power that they're not open to an open challenge. And I think I take Steve's point about destabilisation, but there was no guarantee that Andy Burnham would actually win the selection. It was presumed, because if there was anyone from Labour that was going to win it, it would be him. But looking at the polling and looking what will happen in the absence of him running, one shouldn't presuppose that it is a foregone conclusion that had he run, he would have won. In any case, I do think that there is credence to the economic argument, even if that reveals a weak position from the Labour Party. But I do agree with you, Royfield, that I don't think that this decision was one of discipline. It was definitely one of fear.
Corey, you're up there in Manchester. Why is Andy Burnham so popular?
The King of the North. Well, Andy is a big champion of localism and being able to run things without London and London's strings. So it's interesting that he was trying to run back to London. Put that aside, but he's popular. I think he became mayor in 2017. He was the first mayor, so there wasn't really much to judge him on. I mean, there was sort of like an interim mayor. God, I forgot. It was like the old councillor. But then COVID hit. So 2020, COVID hits, and there are these big fights with Burnham and Boris Johnson mainly about power and control. We were in tier 3, shudders. We were in tier 3 for like a lot longer than other places in the country. So there was a lot of sort of power games. Tier 3, for those who have chosen to forget, and I don't blame them, is when we had the different tiering systems in terms of what you could and couldn't do during COVID. You know, whether you could go to the bar or whether you had to sit at the table and order, or whether the bars are closed or whether they were open, or whether that type of restaurant, that stuff. So there was a big fight, and I don't think he didn't really win those fights with government, really. By the time we came out of tier 3, it was like, well, everybody was coming out of tier 3. He was already in it, right? So he didn't really win, but it's because he showed the fight. He was on TV, giving the press conferences. He's good on camera, which is part of the reason why Keir Starmer is scared, because he's a good communicator, right? So to answer your question, why is he so popular? I think because he is that thing that Northerners love, and it's sticking it to London leadership. But he brings substance with it and a slick communication operation.
And that seat, that Gorton seat, describe the seat for us, describe the area, and if he isn't going to run, who's your money? Which party is your money on winning that?
So I've got the last election in front of me here. So the last general election, 2024, Labour got 50% of the vote. That was down from 2019, where they got 67% of the vote. So in the year where Labour had their massive swing, at least in terms of seats in Parliament, they actually lost almost 20 percentage points in that particular constituency. The pattern followed pretty much every other constituency where Reform did well, in that the Conservatives in the previous election, again, 2019, they were 19%. They dropped to 8%. And Reform went to 14. Obviously, the Brexit Party before were in 5. So we'll just say that was Reform in 2019, the Brexit Party. So Reform essentially ate up half of the Tory vote, but they also ate into the Labour vote. But crucially, the Greens came third. The Greens came third in 2024 behind Labour just by 1 percentage point. So Reform got 14.1% of the vote. The Greens got 13.2% of the vote. And who are the favourites to win this seat? Not Labour, but both Reform and Green are ahead of Labour currently in the polls for this seat. So who's going to win it? I don't know. I hope Reform don't. Thinking about, I was sort of thinking about where that seat is. So that seat is essentially East Manchester. I guess for Londoners, it's probably the equivalent of somewhere like Stratford, maybe. Sort of, it's far enough away from the middle. But I say the middle because Manchester, the core at least, is very interesting to look at. So if you look at the council map, there isn't a single Tory councillor in Manchester City Council. Like there isn't one. The only city that's more Labour than Manchester in the country is Liverpool. So Manchester is very Labour historically and presently, both locally and nationally in terms of MPs. And when I say Manchester, I mean Greater Manchester as well as Manchester proper. So second question, Reform and Greens are looking good on it. I've ranted so long about the numbers. Could you remind me your first question again? I've forgotten it. Sorry.
Describe the constituency, which you just did.
Oh, yeah. So essentially east of Manchester. So you've got Gorton and Denton, a bit different. You can just describe it in so many different ways. I'll describe it in terms of demographics. So Gorton, which is a bit closer to like the Manchester side, very multi-ethnic. Gorton's very multi-ethnic. Denton, not so much, but going a bit further out. But both seats very working class, generally speaking, right? It is not the most. It's like many of our cities, it's in the east, and for some reason, well, there are reasons which are not important now. The east of many of our cities tend to be sort of the more deprived areas, and Manchester's no exception to that. So it's an interesting one. Again, you wouldn't typically think, looking at that city, both in terms of socioeconomic, well, you might in terms of socioeconomics nowadays, but socioeconomics, and definitely not in terms of sort of demography, in terms of ethnicity and the ethnic mix. You wouldn't think Reform, but they are ahead of Labour. The Greens are too. So anybody's guess. Andy Burnham certainly thinks that with him not winning, given a tweet he made yesterday, that Labour's hopes are nil. Let's see.
You would think the most definitely dented. Prevailing winds, that's the reason why the east side of UK cities is always poorer, because of prevailing winds and factory smoke and stink. Steve O'Neill. For the sake of discipline, Labour are almost probably going to lose a rock-solid seat. Is that worth it?
I didn't know until Corey's brilliant explanation that it was looking that dire there. I thought they had a pretty good chance of winning even without Burnham. Yeah, that is going to cause a backlash, I think, if that happens. Because obviously, I've called it discipline. I think it is. But he was between a rock and a hard place. And he's trying to manage a constituency of MPs that we might call soft left, who were looking for a champion, and Burnham was their best bet. And Starmer, I think, being quite rational, has denied them that champion. But they're going to be angry. And you're dead right that they will be annoyed, particularly if that seat goes the other way. Is it worth it? Yeah, for the Starmer team, given that Burnham was likely to challenge, gearing up for May, pushing that back. I think by the sounds of it, they tried to push his entry to Parliament. They said do it in 2027 when they've ridden this storm out. Yeah, I think it probably is worth it for Team Starmer. For Labour in general, hard to say.
Surely the Labour Party needs its most effective communicators. As Corey said, Andy Burnham is a communicator. in Parliament. And so it's got to be the Labour Party has got to be the poorer for it.
The problem Labour has, or risks having, is people pulling in different directions. It becomes completely, as I said, destabilising if Burnham is saying something that's undermining the leadership. Of course, if someone like that was in the cabinet and on message, what you say is right. But I do think that if you had him with a bigger platform or speaking more forcefully against leadership, that's not going to help things.
There's no reason to believe that he wouldn't do exactly that, because I think he's not been very smart. He's very clearly telegraphed before even becoming an MP that he's already off message as the mayor. He's been pretty consistently sort of not, I guess, softly criticizing the leadership direction. In his tweet where he was recognized after they said that he couldn't run, at the end of his tweet he put PS, the papers knew before I did, words to that effect. And it's a bit snipey. And then of course last year at the conference where he basically came out and threw the gauntlet down. So he's not been very smart in that sense. So you're right. There's no reason to believe he would have been on message as an MP, because he's certainly not been whilst he's been out of Parliament.
Poses a bigger question, which is, of course, if leadership was acting like leadership, such a challenge would not be required in the first place. And I think what I find particularly remarkable is that even in the face of these consistent challenges, we're not seeing the adjustments, both from a character perspective, from a communications perspective, and from an action perspective, that make Starmer's premiership what it ought to be, what it was promised, and what the British public deserve. And so, yes, the Burnham situation is a sideshow that may continue to play out in untold ways as yet. But the underlying problem remains the same, which is we have ended up with a leader that is deficient in many respects and that is ultimately responsible for the ways in which things continue to play out. And I don't feel that this situation has shown him as somebody willing to take responsibility for that, because ultimately the buck still lies with him.
But what does this also say, though, Leah? A question to you about if you're an ambitious Labour MP, surely what Starmer is all about is some level of control freakery. If you are an independent, ambitious Labour MP, there is no level of dissent at all, is there? The party doesn't brook any level of ideological difference or dissent.
I think this is one of the questions that I've had about the Labour Party in general since the general election in 2024. And we saw it play out on the international stage when Darren Jones was asked to respond to what Keir Starmer thought of Venezuela. We see it in the way that the Labour MPs are given effectively a script every time that there is an issue and feel, I guess, to some degree silenced when they would otherwise speak out on a topic. And that level of close monitoring and control isn't leadership. We are being deceived in the way that we are receiving information as if that is the best way. But it is certainly by no means the only way. And so I think one of the challenges that I have with the situation that we find ourselves in today is that it doesn't matter who it is that is on the front page of the paper challenging Starmer. I'm not convinced that he made this decision of his own accord, which makes it even more problematic that he is being advised in a way that puts his self-protection front and center, when ultimately it is not supposed to be about the party. It's not supposed to be about the individual leader, but it is ultimately supposed to be, as a public servant, your responsibility to act in the best interest of the people that you serve. And none of this drama is in the best interest of the people that are served. And I think there has always been this obsession with becoming prime minister. This is a tale as old as time. But there seems to be something about the way that power is wielded and about the ability to hold other people out of the place of power that has become the prime focus in a time where unity is essential, where clarity is a non-negotiable, where finances are tight and where the nation is going through a difficult time. This is not what we need. And I would like to see leadership that actually prioritizes the things that are important rather than whose one-upmanship on the next person has made it trending on Twitter.
One of the things that I found so weird about this government over the last 18 months is it feels like deja vu to what came before. Like since Brexit, we just had Tory psychodrama after Tory psychodrama, and a lot of a feeling that the government couldn't get stuff done. And the news cycle has been just now Labour psychodrama after Labour psychodrama, and not a lot of coverage of stuff getting done. And one, I think you're dead right that there is a problem with vision and leadership. There's also something around just doing politics in the modern age, I think anywhere, but in Britain, I think it's so driven, it's so minute to minute from media, social media thing, and no one's been able to quite get a grip on it and look like they're delivering and look stable. I don't know how one does that, but I do worry that this all plays into Farage's hands, this kind of they're all the same chaos sort of narrative.
I agree with what you said, Steve, and I think it's this: there hasn't been a prime minister who's had both respect and authority. So I think Starmer has respect, but he's absolutely no authority. Boris Johnson, within the Tory party, 2019 to 2022, had authority, limited respect. I just go through the prime ministers. I think Theresa May, like Starmer, had respect but no authority. You're probably going back to maybe Cameron 2015. I know that's probably an unpopular thing to say, but that's probably the last time you had a prime minister who had both respect and authority. And then COVID screwed him up, and then we know, sorry, not COVID, Brexit screwed him up, and we know what happened after that. And that's the problem. Like Starmer has absolutely no authority in the party right now. People probably, I guess, people respect him because he's sort of honest Keir, who was the DPP and came to save the Labour Party type thing. But he's clearly got no authority. And I think you're right, Leah. I think he's, to an extent, his strings are being pulled. I watched a video of him earlier when he was asked about why Burnham had been blocked. And like a lot of the time, he looked like literally a deer in headlights. Like he has this sort of, and it wasn't right because we were going to have an expensive election for a new mess. Like you don't look like he didn't have that kind of Machiavellian sense that, oh yeah, you clearly just pulled strings, didn't you? And he probably did, but again, I think a lot of it was almost like he's being like seriously influenced. That's just my take. By looking at him, he doesn't look like the evil master who's pulling everybody else's strings. It just looked a bit like, what's going on here?
It is so peculiar though, because he wasn't just head of the DPP. He's a KC. He's a trained, experienced barrister. One of the key components to being a barrister in the UK is the ability to be erudite, to be able to think on your feet, to be able to be charismatic, to be able to bring people along with you. Where is that version of this man? Because that is the version of this man that we need. And I just don't understand why the people around him won't enable that version of him, or perhaps it was never there. And if it wasn't, we've been misled. So, jury's out.
That's an excellent point about what a KC, what a barrister is supposed to be. It's somebody who's fleet of foot mentally. And you're right, it can actually play to the gallery, and that's something which Starmer can't do for whatever reason. He isn't charismatic. The one thing I want to pull you up before we go on to the last section of the show, which is when do you stop saying Happy New Year? One thing I want to pull you up about, Corey, is the authority and respect thing, which I thought was an excellent way of looking at the characteristics of PMs. I think Keir Starmer has massive authority within the Labour Party. Things are incredibly tight in terms of his level of control. But I don't think people respect him at all. So I'd flip it the other way around. Him as Prime Minister, and that's another thing. But actually what we're talking about here is an internal Labour Party issue, isn't it? Can this member, and the member does happen to be Andy Burnham, run for this seat? Can he be the Labour representative? And in the interests of good governance, where you have great characters in the cabinet who are competent, who can take the Labour message forward and also, dare I say, renew it, you need somebody like Andy Burnham. because it's a cabinet of pygmies so far. Anyway, that's the end of British news. Now we're going to go on to our last section, which is when to stop saying Happy New Year. It is now January the 26th. Is it right and proper to stop saying Happy New Year, especially if you've seen somebody for the first time? You haven't seen them since the New Year. I don't know. What are the mores? What are the norms on this? Steve O'Neill, when is it proper, polite to stop saying Happy New Year?
So I think as a Brit, you can go to the 15th of Jan, Happy New Year, but after that, you've got to say belatedly first, and that'll get you through to 1st of Feb. That's my 2 cents.
Logan Phillips.
Personally, I stop around like the 10th, but I really like when you're seeing someone, you're saying, hey, like if you just say how you're doing, you just get an automatic response. Both of you aren't paying attention. So I like to change it up every once in a while. And around now, like I'll ask people how's their new year going so far, and then I get an actual real answer on how they're doing.
So when you say round about the 10th, can that be the 13th, the 14th? That's round about the 10th, or can it be like the 5th? I need a little bit more precision here.
No,
You're a
I
pollster.
forgot
You're a
to bring
pollster.
my
You're all
calendar
about
day to
precision.
day to think about this. I didn't mark it this time, but I will tell you what, Royfield, when the calendar turns to 2027 and we have another podcast, I will be ready for you with the perfect precision on the last day that I say it.
I like that. I like that a lot. Mike Donahue, sir, when do you stop saying Happy New Year? Or do you even give somebody that greeting?
It makes me really tense. So my honest answer for this year is January 2nd. That's the cutoff. Like I don't want to. Well, because normally you're happy about the new year. This new year fills me with nothing but trepidation and fear. And I'll also say, right, which new year are we talking about? Right? Are we talking about Rosh Hashanah? Are we talking about the Lunar New Year? Are we talking about Nowruz? Are we talking about Songkran, which this year is particularly important to me? Diwali? Which new year are we talking about? Because I don't want to be.
Which one we're talking about. It's a very clever answer, but you know the one we're talking about. You could have even said the Orthodox New Year, the Ethiopian New Year, the Thai New Year. Put me in the column
for 3 years. I want to say Happy New Year in 2029 or whatever the hell it is.
So for you, it depends on the administration and how egregious they are as to whether you greet anybody with that salutation, Happy New Year.
No, it depends on my fear and loathing of the year yet to come.
Got it. Right. Corey Bernard, what says you, sir?
January the 6th, everything stops. You take down the Christmas trees, you take down the decorations, you stop saying Happy New Year from January the 7th. So 11:59 p.m., January 6th, that's when everything is done. Obviously, January 6th being 12th night, Epiphany, 12 days of Christmas, yada, yada, yada. So yeah, January 6th, I think it's a good one. I know you didn't ask this question, but I have a very serious problem with anybody who has Christmas decorations up before January the 18th, so a week before Christmas. If you've got decorations up on January
December,
10th,
you mean?
I think you need to... December, yeah. If you've got decorations up on December the 10th, I think you need to see a doctor.
Yeah. Listen, I'm with you completely. I hate it when I agree with you, because I think something's misaligned, in the planetary forces, but I just think it's tacky beyond belief that people have Christmas decorations up in November, right? I get it. If you've got little kids, you're going to be pressured like heck, whatever. But like, at least wait until December. Those people like early November, that's just all level of wrong. And I think you've given us the most cogent answer. It's the 6th of January, which is fundamentally a week after, isn't it, as well? So it's pretty neat. Leah, can you do any better than that?
Yeah, I'm afraid as somebody whose birthday is on the 7th of January, I vehemently disagree with Corey. Although I will say that last week I did say Happy New Year to someone and it just felt wrong. So my vote has to be for Blue Monday. I think the cutoff is probably Blue Monday, and thereafter you cannot say Happy New Year anymore.
Well, so obviously the background music now is New Order, Blue Monday. Another Manchester link. What a Manchester filled show this has been. Quickly, before we wrap things up, Leah Brown, where can people find you on the socials?
I can be found on TikTok and Instagram at Leah Talks _ or on LinkedIn, Leah Brown, FRSA.
Corey Bernard, same question to you, sir.
168 polymath, because it was our first video session. I wanted to do like a, actually, I'm going to do it now. I'm going to do it right now, actually. Doesn't matter. There's no, I can write quickly. Yeah, because we're on video. Oh.
That didn't work at all, sir. That...
Oh, my Zoom's on blur. 168 polymath. There we go. Next person, please. Save me my embarrassment.
Mike Donahue, please save the recording.
Where to find me?
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I've now gone into hiding. You need to find me.
Steve O'Neill.
Steve Zero O'Neill on LinkedIn mainly, and I'm still lurking a bit on Twitter.
Logan Phillips, sir.
On Twitter, Logan R2WH, but really go to Race to the White House, and that's where I do my work. And within a few minutes, you get a good understanding of the shape of American elections for the Senate, House, and governor races.
Fantastic. There you go. That's been your panel. Goodness, don't they look like a wonderfully resplendent lot of beautiful and handsome pundits on your YouTube for your delectation. I've been Royfield Brown. That's been Leah Brown, Corey Bernard, Mike Donahue, Steve O'Neill, and Logan Phillips. Toodle pip. Take care. Look after yourselves. Bye-bye. Steve O'Neill. We're talking about British politics. All of a sudden, it seems British politics has got exciting. Or at least we have something to report on anyway.